So my mobile phone was flashing and ringing in the middle of the night, and it was my daughter Emma. And she had gone for the first time to the music festival Tea in the Park. She'd gone with her friends and her boyfriend. She had been so looking forward to it. It was a trip of a lifetime for her, and she'd been waiting for it for a very long time. However, it was clearly not what she'd hoped for, because as I picked up the phone, she was crying. And as a mother, I started to feel, what has happened? She quickly explained that actually she had lost her festival pass. And that wasn't good, as that meant she couldn't get into any of the music venues, and she wasn't allowed to get it replaced. And then she said she'd also lost one of her wellies and it was raining. And as well as that, her tent, which was pitched a bit too close to the toilets, to the extent that people couldn't quite differentiate whether it was a toilet or a tent. So that was not great either. So she was very unhappy, and she decided she'd have to come home. And sure enough, they arrived, her and her boyfriend, first thing in the morning. They crashed in the house, went on the couch, and they fell asleep. Once recovered after a few hours sleeping, they decided they'd go out for another wee trip in the car. And it wasn't long before my mobile phone was ringing again, and Emma's name was flashing up. This time, she was telling me that John, her boyfriend, had dropped his car keys down a drain. So, just to fill you in on where we live in a multicultural area called Pollock Shields, which has become very famous recently for Kenmure Street. And this happened in Kenmure Street. So, uh, our stepdad went down to the car, and at that point, he looked at the situation and he decided that there really wasn't much hope. These car keys were down in this drain and there wasn't much she could do. He came back, but on me hearing that, I thought, no, there's something we must be able to do. So I grabbed a coat hanger and a magnet, as you do, and went down to the drain. When I arrived there, thinking I would spring into action, there were already four people round the drain with Emma and John, and they also really interestingly had coat hangers and magnets. So I'm not quite sure who was selling them or where they all came from, but anyway, they were there. They were poking down in the drain into the mire below, and Emma and John were standing watching this activity. But unfortunately, this wasn't successful. However, the activity attracted a lot more people, and animated conversations began around the drain as the numbers swelled to 20. And all the possibilities of how we might retrieve these keys from the drain were being discussed. And at this point, it was quite incredible. It was as if the waves were parting. A man arrived, and he was different from the others. He had a cream linen suit on and soft leather shoes, and he stood glowing among us all. And the crowd just parted and watched him, every eye drawn to him. He very quickly started to give commands in Urdu, and the folk were following what he was saying. And at this point, 6 people sprang into action and started to lift the drain up from the ground. Now, I don't know if anyone has seen a drain come up, but it's not just the top sort of mesh. As you lift it up, there's a huge big wad of iron underneath. So it's incredibly heavy. And it was sort of cast to the side like a big lolloping seal at the side. And as that was happening, more commands came from this man. His jacket was removed and someone held it for him. He then bent down took off his shoe, and started to roll up his trouser leg. Silent among the crowd as he put his foot and leg down into the drain. We watched in astonishment as he felt round in the mire, in the viscous, horrible stench, and to try and find the keys with his foot. After about 20 minutes, he pulled his foot out, and people said, "Have you finished?" And he turned and looked at everyone and said, "Have I found the keys yet?" And at this point, everyone just agreed that we had to continue. He then gave orders. There was a mini market at the corner, and he went into the mini market and asked them to bring out these gallon plastic containers and asked them to cut the top off of them. He then ordered people to put them round the drain, and he lay down on the ground and started to scoop out all the dirt from the drain and throw it onto the pavement. The coat hanger people were very excited because they were employed once again, because they could then scoop the look through the mire with their coat hangers to see if the keys were there. So we did this for another 30 minutes, and after a while, unfortunately, the keys weren't found. However, he wasn't giving up, and he decided to lie down on the ground once again. And this time, he put his whole head into the drain, along with his hands and his arm, and stretched down into the drain and felt down. People were holding his legs at the other end, and he went down in and felt round down the bottom. And he, after about 10 minutes, came up, and this time he had the keys. There were now 40 people round the drain at this point, and the cheer from the people was just enormous and quite incredible for Emma and John, who couldn't believe that the keys had been found. Everyone sort of started to say, "Oh, you'll have to give him something. He's done such an amazing thing." And people were bringing out water to wash his hands, and we were thanking him profusely and saying, "Thank you so much. It was just incredible." And we actually asked him what his name was. And he turned and said to us, "My name is India." And the Pakistani boys, a group of young boys standing at the side, were saying, no, you're Pakistani, you're not Indian." And he just smiled. He then told us lots of stories about, what he'd done in his life and how far he'd been and the trips that he had gone and the things that he'd learned from where he'd been. And one of them was to find things in drains. That actually it was how he had done it, and he'd done it by his feet. He then actually, after refusing anything from us, got his jacket back on, turned round, said goodbye, and walked up the road. And we never saw him again in that area. And we've lived there for 34 years.